Today we are with Chanel Hason with the Elakha Alliance. Chanel, thank you so much for being here today. Can't wait to learn a little bit more about your organization.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Yeah, so why don't we just get started with how did the organization start, and what was kind of that the main idea that kind of spawned the whole organization?
Of course, happy to share that story. So, we were created by the late David Hatch, who was a member of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. And he was actually building a dinghy with his son, a boat, and wanted to name it. He got a Chinook jargon dictionary and came across the word Elakha. So then he's like, well, if there's a word for sea otter in here, what happened to sea otters in Oregon? So that led down a whole path of activism and questioning and meeting with different scientists at universities to figure out what happened to Oregon sea otters and why it's super important to bring them back. So unfortunately, he passed away several years ago, but his passion and his mission to bring sea otters back to Oregon lives on through the Elakha Alliance, our nonprofit. His son, Peter Hatch, is a member on our board, so he lives on through him as well. And so that's how we were created, from an idea in 1999, and we officially became a nonprofit in 2020.
Nice. So, you mentioned that there was no sea otters in the area of Oregon. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, what is the organization doing? Are you trying to bring sea otters back to the area? Have you succeeded with that? Like, what's the mission there?
So, our nonprofit was formed by tribal, nonprofit, and conservation leaders with a shared belief and a powerful vision, and that is an Oregon coast 50 years from now, where our children and grandchildren can coexist with a thriving sea otter population and a robust and resilient marine ecosystem. So, our mission is to restore a healthy population of sea otters on the Oregon coast and thereby make our marine ecosystems more robust and resilient. So, sea otters haven't been on our coast for over a century because they were hunted for their very, very soft, luscious fur in the maritime fur trade. So, Oregon is actually the only state in the Western Pacific that doesn't have sea otters that used to. So, it's really crucial that we close that gap right now.
Mm-hmm. And since 1999, when you guys started, have you been able to see and measure an impact of how many sea otters are coming back into the area? And what was the kind of impact that you guys have had so far?
Yeah, so sea otters aren't really a migratory species, so they don't naturally just come and repopulate an area. There's a 900-mile gap from Washington State and California where the closest sea otter populations are. So we are trying to lessen that gap. So that means we physically have to translocate a population of sea otters and bring them to the Oregon coast.
Oh, let's dive into that a little bit. So, how exactly do you do that?
So that would be led by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service because sea otters are protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act federally. So they would be in charge of that. So it's up to them to pick the stock location of where they would want to take sea otters. My guess is from Alaska because that's where 90% of all the sea otters live in the world. So there's about 70,000 as a population there. So to take, maybe 100 sea otters from that location wouldn't have a dent on their ecosystem or their population in general. So just grab them and put them on a plane and then take them to Oregon.
There we go. And once they're, in Oregon, how quick do they like repopulate and like have babies and give birth? Like, how does that usually work, and how long does that process take?
Great question. So sea otters are very slow in the number of growth of their population over time. So sea otter moms have one pup a year. Sometimes they survive, sometimes they don't. So if you translocated, 35 animals or so, it might take a good decade to really see that population become stable and increase over time.
Wow. So you have a 50-year goal. Now, is that part of the reason why I was going to ask about the 50-year goal. That's a long vision to have, right? That's great to have
Mhm.
a vision that far out. But with what you just said, you almost have to have a 50-year goal now because it takes so long for them to repopulate.
Sea otters, like I mentioned, take a long time to make a population stable. Since they only have one pup a year, it takes a while for that population to expand and grow. Um, so it depends also on the habitat of the ecosystem, how big that population can be. So, based on bone middens found on the Oregon coast, which are just big bone piles from indigenous peoples, there are sea otter bones across most of the entire coastline, but mainly on the south coast where kelp forests are located, which is their main habitat. Um, and they estimate around 3,000 were living on the whole Oregon coast thousands of years ago. But we're guessing it would take a really long time to ever get to that number. So if we started with 100, and that's why it takes, 50 plus years to really see the population grow over time, which is why it's part of our vision, just so the population is set and doing well, and we can go visit them with our grandchildren and say, hey, I helped make this happen.
So, where your passion for sea otters, where did that come in? And what brought you into the alliance and got you to kind of join their team?
Yeah. I fell in love with sea otters when I was 5 years old. So I was that kid who went to SeaWorld and was like, this is what I want to do. I want to work with marine mammals. I want to study marine biology. And that's exactly what it says in my fifth grade yearbook of what do you want to be when you grow up. And so I did my undergrad in environmental science, technology, and policy with an emphasis in marine and coastal ecology from Cal State University in Monterey Bay. I studied abroad in Australia for a year doing research on the Great Barrier Reef. I then graduated and had some miscellaneous jobs, worked for Jean-Michel Cousteau in Puerto Rico as an eco-tour guide naturalist for Ambassadors of the Environment program. And then I decided I really love teaching people about the ocean, and I should get my teaching credential. And so I ended up at Portland State University and got my graduate degree in leadership for sustainability education. So, more of like kind of a holistic learning and teaching style. Serendipitously, this job popped into my inbox, a sea otter based job in the middle of Portland. I would have never have guessed. And I actually applied for the position and never got an interview.
No.
And then a year later, the position came back out. I applied and immediately got the offer for the job. So for all those people who, have a door shut in their face, it's not the end of the world. Keep going. But yeah, it's honestly my dream job. I know that sounds cheesy, but anybody who knows me when I got this job said how in the world is this position just perfectly made for you and your passion and your love? And I can honestly say every day I wake up and I get to work for the Elakha Alliance, I'm stoked. It is everything I love to do.
Well, that's an amazing story. I love that. And you're right. If anything, like one door shuts, multiple doors will open. But what your advice of not giving up, I think, is right on with that. So I love the fact of the opportunity might not have been perfect for you. The universe will always tell you kind of what direction you should be going in. So yeah, maybe it took a year for the alliance to get back to you and publish another job, but maybe they weren't ready, right? Maybe it's either
Mm-hmm.
you or they weren't ready at the time. It just took a year, but you stuck with it and you eventually got the dream job and everything worked out perfectly. So that's amazing. As far as I want to just quickly divert to fundraising, how do you currently fundraise now, and what is kind of your biggest fundraiser, your most influential to the organization, and how do you kind of run that?
Yeah, so we are a super small nonprofit. I was the first employee 2.5 years ago, and now we have 4 employees. We doubled in capacity last year. So, just to give a frame of reference, we apply for a lot of grants and individual donations, and we do a lot of fundraisers as well. So I like to be super creative in my fundraising ideas because I can't help myself.
Mhm.
So our biggest fundraiser of the year, which will be in April, in Portland, is called the Oregon Otter Beer Festival. So Portland likes their craft beer and people love sea otters. So we combine the two. And so I have over a handful of local breweries making a sea otter themed beer using
Oh,
Maris
nice.
otter malt. And so they donate a portion of sales at the brewery of selling that beer to us. And then we bring people together to a huge festival where they can taste all of the sea otter beers. And then we have judges and they can pick their fan favorite. And we give each of the breweries a special little plaque. And there we have door prize raffles from amazing businesses and local artists that donate for that help us raise money. And we have incredible sponsors from the community as well that help make this whole thing happen. So we started it 2 years ago, and now I can't not do it because everyone always asks me, like, when are tickets going on sale? Like, when can I go? And it sells out in a matter of weeks. So it's like my little baby that now is a huge big deal.
Mm.
So it's really fun.
I love that because one of the things that I love interviewing people and hearing the stories of the fundraisers that they come up with, and they basically just had to think outside the box to say, "Hey, let's go to all these breweries and create a otter style, an otter themed beer, and we'll give them a plaque, and we'll, raise some money and get portions of the sale." Like, those are things you have to like come up on your own. You can't just read a blog article and unless you publish one now, right? So
Yeah.
unless you publish one now to be able to learn these kind of things. We were talking with another one. It was a movie. They did fundraisers at movie theaters where they made little pins, and they became every year. It's a new pin theme, and it's a collector's item. So now they're getting lots of people to show up at this fundraiser every year because now they want to keep their collection going, right? So it's like
Yeah.
little fun things like that that you have to keep doing to engage your member and your community to kind of keep them coming in and fundraising. So I love to hear that. I think that's a great idea. I might want to ping you on a side note and talk more about that and see what we can do to maybe help some other organizations do something similar. But I love that idea. When it comes to fundraising, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that your organization faces?
I think that we're just so small. So sometimes it's hard to be everywhere at once. And also, around 90% of the people that I interact with tabling at different events and functions, they don't even know sea otters don't live on the Oregon coast anymore, which for me is like, how do you not know this information? But it's understandable because we have them at the Oregon Zoo in Portland and we have them at the Oregon Coast Aquarium in Newport. And so they see them on exhibit and they're like, oh, of course, they're, just right over there in the ocean as well. So I think the biggest thing is spreading the message of sea otters aren't here and they once were, and they're super important ecologically for our they are super important ecologically as a keystone species. They have a lot of cultural significance with our Oregon coastal tribes, and socioeconomically they would benefit our coastal communities through wildlife tourism. So just being able to get in front of an audience, whether it's third graders all the way to retirement communities, which I have done everything in between, just getting those moments and opportunities to speak our message and let people know why it's so super important for them to care about this.
Hmm. And I mean, it's all about the awareness, right? Because I would have never thought anywhere along the coast there would be a no sea otters or no population of sea otters. Like, it just, for me, I'm in Chicago, so I'm so far away from the coast, I don't even think about it. But even for
Mm-hmm.
people by the coast, I can see them if they're not thinking about it or around it very often, around the, people talking about sea otters, that awareness definitely will kind of, and you're right, you have to be, it's a very manual process, and you have to almost be at all of these events. And I can see how it could be a grind, but you're doing it for a reason. And eventually it'll start to snowball, and hopefully you're there now, or you will be there soon. Where it comes to kind of the hustle and the grind of kind of constantly going out there and promoting the organization and bringing awareness to it, how did you just get started with that? If you can just walk us through, like, if I'm a lot of smaller nonprofits like yourself watch this podcast and they want to know, how did you do it? A lot of them have a mindset of, I can just create a nonprofit and we're going to run a couple of fundraisers online and it's just going to blow up, right? But that's not how it works. So if you could take me back to kind of how, when you joined the organization, kind of where was it, and then what kind of awareness did you kind of bring to the mix to help kind of grow it to where it is today, and where you think it's going?
Yeah, so I've been involved in the nonprofit realm for a really long time. I think anybody who studies marine science realizes that volunteering and getting hands on experience doing beach cleanups or working with marine mammals, like I did, understand that it takes a lot of grassroots activism. And I also volunteer for the Surfrider Foundation in the Portland chapter for the last 7 years, ever since I moved here. So I think it's good to volunteer and find other like-minded people, and then use that as your, network, your partnership base. So when you join an organization, you already have a good number of people with connections that you can reach out to help with whatever you're doing. So when I joined, we had I was a contractor, and our director of science and policy, within me starting in 2 weeks, he got his dream job, and so left the organization. And so it was just me and our board of directors. So I was a little like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I was, hopeful that he was going to teach me all his things. But, sometimes that's also an opportunity. So I'm very thankful that I have a lot of creative freedom, and I have a background in marketing and communication. So I think social media is where we kind of started and got a lot of awareness and outreach out. And people started following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we also have a really great YouTube channel. So I think that kind of was the basis. And then we started to partner with more local businesses and other nonprofits, and then started doing, our outreach in terms of presenting to classrooms and going to other nonprofit events. And so it kind of just snowballed from there. And luckily, our animal that we're trying to return is really charismatic. So people love to just see photos of them and learn about them. So that's definitely a benefit for us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how things started. And now, if I see someone at a conference, like last week, I was at the Oregon chapter of the Wildlife Society conference, and there's somebody wearing an Elakha Alliance sweater that was not me. And I was like, it makes me so happy to see, the merch that I have made out there in the wild.
Yeah, it's always a great thing when it's someone you don't know is wearing your brand, and you feel great inside when it was you that helped bring that brand out there, and it's just it's an amazing thing. I think it brings almost a reality, being like, okay, I am doing this for a reason. People are watching and listening, because I think a lot of times people will get complacent and like they almost plateau a little bit, thinking like, what am I doing all this for? It's not even it's not resonating with anybody. It's not doing anything, but it really is having an impact on other people. They're hearing it, they're listening to it, and they'll buy the swag and they'll wear it, and
Yeah.
hopefully they'll be able to run into them more often. So going back to kind of sea otters, what actual impact or importance do they have to the ecosystem? And what is that important, or what is it that they bring to the ecosystem that is so important, that helps to, I guess, help it thrive?
Yeah. So why would reintroducing sea otters be a huge benefit? Ecologically, they are a keystone species, which means the weight of the ecosystem working in function and everything being super productive weighs a lot heavier on their shoulders than any other species. Um, and so restoration of sea otters and important historical gaps or important gaps of their historical range, which Oregon coast would be one, would improve the status of a federally threatened subspecies. So the southern sea otter is listed as threatened under the ESA right now, Endangered Species Act. So that would be super crucial. And there's been a lot of amazing research on sea otters impacting the coastal ecosystem. So a recent study from Central California shows that the presence of sea otters in kelp forests have increased by 56%. So the kelp forest coverage, because we didn't talk about this yet, but the kelp forests on the West Coast are quickly diminishing because of one, the lack of sea otters and increasing ocean temperatures, and a lack of another species that was kind of holding it down for the kelp forest ecosystem while sea otters have been absent, and that's the sunflower sea star. So both sea otters and sunflower sea stars eat sea urchins, those spiny little purple things, and sea urchins eat kelp. So without predators to eat the sea urchins are eating kelp forests at an astronomical rate. So something has to be done in the face of that. And sea otters also help with coastal erosion in creek banks and marsh edges. Say that 3 times fast.
Yeah.
In areas with large sea otter populations, it slowed the coastal erosion by 90%. Which is huge because we have rising sea levels and stronger tidal currents that should be causing the opposite effect. So yeah, sorry. There's like so much to tell you. It's hard for me to cut myself off, but
Hey, that's
hopefully that
okay.
is helpful.
This is here. Just keep talking. I'm learning a lot, so it's great. What fun stories do you have since being involved with the organization, from your work with volunteering, some of the people that you work with or you see interact with, donors? Any fun stories that you can share with us?
I love working with kids. So anytime I'm tabling and get to interact with children who are fascinated by sea otters, and then I am so astounded that everything I'm telling them they already know. So I ask them, fun questions, and they just spit it right back out. They're like, "Oh yeah, sea otters are a keystone species for our kelp forest ecosystems." I'm like, "Are you a mini me? What's happening?"
Yeah. They watch your
Their
YouTube
parents are
videos.
like, I had no idea. So for me, interacting with the kids who are, our future generation, it gives me hope that they understand why it's so important to bring sea otters back. Um, and then just when people come up to me after I've done a presentation and understand that my passion is the same passion that they've had as a kid too, for sea otters and for the ocean, and sharing their personal stories and their journeys with me, that makes me feel very humble, and also just really thankful that I'm not alone and there are people who actually care about this just as much as I do.
Yeah, I just had the thought of like, for this type of an organization or organization type, animals, right? Animal, wildlife, anything like that. Even a kids YouTube channel with YouTube videos just for kids. I could see that being something that they can drive. My kids are, when they were younger, that's all they wanted. They just were scrolling through Facebook, and it was all. I don't know where they learned this stuff, but they all pick it up from somewhere. So I can see maybe they were watching some YouTube video, and it was one about sea otters that just happened to pop up. But that could be a good, just awareness tool. Is something like that for kids.
Mhm.
So, as far as people that are not in Oregon, is there a way to help the mission? Like, how can people get involved even when they're not in your state?
Yeah, great question. So we have a lot of people outside of the state that support us, because restoring a keystone species on the whole West Coast benefits all of us.
Mm.
So even though you're not near the coast, you're breathing in because of it. Seaweed produces around 70% of the oxygen on the planet. So seaweed is kelp, kelp is seaweed. And so that is super crucial for people who are not living near the coast and they're like, why should I care what happens in the ocean? It's because you're breathing it every day. So that's kind of a good, realization for people everywhere that, oh, thank you, ocean. Thank you, seaweed, for being out there so I can
Mm-hmm.
breathe. Um, uh, what people can do is obviously one, donate on our website, elakhaalliance.org, or buy any of our merch that helps us as well. So if you wear an Elakha Alliance shirt, my mom is in Florida and she's like, I'm wearing my Elakha Alliance long sleeve. And people, look at me in the in the grocery store and they're like, what is that? She just told me that last week. I didn't make that up. So, obviously it helps to wear it and showcase what we're all about and have people ask you questions and just to spread the message about sea otters are missing in Oregon and why that's super important for our kelp forest as a whole.
Hmm. Well, that's great. Well, we'll make sure to include all your links and everything to all of our posts. So going back, I want to just kind of finish things off with kind of uh, the last segment of our podcast where I like to try to help other nonprofits with any type of nuggets or tidbits you might have from experience that could help them grow. So you said you have a marketing background, and it seems like you're very heavily into social media for awareness and growth. How do you approach it? I always think of, kind of marketing from a business side of things, right? So for businesses are trying to market so that they can increase revenue. Donate or nonprofit organizations need to market to do the almost the exact same thing, but it's just different words, right? I don't want people to hear the word profit or revenue as a dirty word because you need revenue and donations to support your mission. Kind of approach the marketing side of things kind of like from any type of business, for-profit business experience that you brought into the nonprofit world to be successful.
A lot of things I feel like are self-taught through trial and error. So it's okay if you do a campaign and it bombs. You live and you learn, and then you try something new. So I've done that many times, and each nonprofit is different with the audience of who you have. So like us doing our Otter Beer Fest reaches a whole new audience of people who really like beer, perhaps, and then they're like, "What is this sea otter? Why is this involved? And what is this nonprofit putting on this really cool beer fest?" So just finding like different avenues of different audiences, I think, is super important to spread your message. Like we're doing a sea otter sip and paint night at a winery where people are coming to paint a sea otter. So that's like, getting some creative artistic folks
Mm-hmm.
and getting their attention. But and I think also talking to other nonprofits and learning about what campaigns they've run or what social media things they're doing to increase their revenue as well is super helpful because we're all in this together doing something positive, hopefully, for the planet and for the people. So making sure you have a good network of people you can reach out to and learn from, and they can learn from you as well, is really beneficial.
Mm-hmm. So my last question is a personal question for you, but it seems like you're very, thoughtful to the environment, nonprofits. Where did that side of you kind of come from? Or is there experience from your childhood? Did your parents instill that into you, like the caring for like not only nonprofits but the environment? Obviously, sea otters is kind of the avenue you're going in now, but where did that personal kind of experience and desire kind of come from in your in your past?
That's a great question. I think it's from falling in love with the ocean at a young age and then just kind of deep diving into that world since I was 5 and just being fascinated and learning and watching, all the PBS specials and all that fun stuff. Really, just stuck with me. And I grew up in a single family household. So my mom raised me and she got me involved in volunteering and doing so many things when I was a kid. She said, I was just trying to keep you busy so you didn't get in trouble. But I think doing that and becoming very independent and doing public speaking for the city and different events and being on, Associated Student Body as vice president and like all these different things, I think, molded me into someone who is very caring for the planet and for people, loves educating people, and is just super passionate about doing what I love, and also creating good partnerships. I think that's like a big part of this position, and also just me as a person is creating friendships with people who also are similar and also maybe not so similar to learn from each other.
That's wonderful. It seems like your mother did a great job, kind of raising you and kind of molding you into the person you are today. So that's amazing. One more question, and this is one I promise is the last one. Like what would you tell the 10 year old Chanel, of how you should kind of approach life and approach kind of looking at the world kind of today?
Work hard, and say yes to opportunities that may seem scary. That it's okay to try things out that may not have been your first choice. I have had many jobs where I learned, nope, I don't want to work in retail ever again. Nope, I don't want to sit in an office that has no windows and cubicles. But I wouldn't know those things necessarily without trying them. So it's okay to go and try things, have different career opportunities, and figure out, what is good for you and what isn't good for you. And also just to say yes to opportunities that may seem big and scary, like packing up your life in 2 weeks and moving to a whole different state for a job that you really are passionate about, leaving, all your friends and family behind. Um, and, I studied abroad in Australia for a whole year. And honestly, I wanted to come back after 6 months because I missed, my friends and my boyfriend at the time, like silly things now that I'm like, why would that even matter? But my family was like, you are staying there. We will help you stay there. This is, an amazing opportunity. You get to go out on the Great Barrier Reef and do research. So then you have to kind of like snap back into why this is an incredible journey that you're on and why am I here and doing these things. It's, yeah, there's no, simple pathway. I went down multiple paths of different careers and realized, where I am now is encompassing all the things that I'm passionate about and that I'm good at doing.
Hmm.
So it's, I'm very privileged that and lucky that I have this job that I love so much. But I definitely went through the ringer of other things in this life to get here. So I'm very thankful.
Well, I think part of it is you just have to take risks and trust yourself. I mean, you can
Mm-hmm.
always go back if you needed to, right? But a lot of people are just so scared to just go forward and try something new and get out of their comfort zone. And I think that's exactly what people have to do to really find their purpose. And I think that's a great quality that you showed, that you were able to just kind of leave everything behind and be like, I'm just going to go. This is where I'm being called. I'm going to try it out. Figure it out. What it takes a lot of guts, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's awesome. I admire that about you. How about that? I
That's
admire
great.
that
I'll take it.
about you. I think that's great because there's been so many times in my past where it's like, I wish I just had the guts to go do that. Like, why didn't I? It's like all I did was delay it, and I eventually did it. Like 20 years later, it's like I could have been 20 years further along if I would have just done this back then, right?
I would like to touch upon some achievements that the Elakha Alliance has. And so we published a scientific feasibility study on reintroducing sea otters back to Oregon in 2022, and it was led by the top 6 sea otter scientists basically of the world. So they assess habitat suitability, health, welfare, logistical, regulatory, stakeholder concerns, all the things. And they did say it is feasible for sea otters to be reintroduced. So that is very positive.
Yeah.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service also published a feasibility assessment on reintroducing sea otters in Northern California and Oregon. And they also said it was feasible. So those are 2 really big things, hopefully to help move a reintroduction forward in the near future within, hopefully 5 to 7 years is our timeline.
That's amazing. Well, it seems like you're doing a great job over there. Chanel, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And I can't wait to see what the impact is over the next 50 years that you have on the organization, on the sea otters and the coast in Oregon. So looking forward to that. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.